There is a street in central Tel Aviv that you cannot see on Google Maps, not because it does not exist, not because it was demolished. It is a real street in the heart of one of the most mapped, most photographed, most surveilled cities on Earth. And both Google Maps and Russia's Yandex Maps have independently chosen to blur the satellite imagery, remove the street view, and strip the location metadata from that entire block. The street is Leonardo da Vinci Street. And what sits at its intersection, hidden in plain sight behind a pair of 18-story luxury apartment towers called the Da Vinci Complex, is the most classified piece of real estate in the state of Israel. Beneath the footprint of those towers, according to documented research, construction records obtained through public U.S. government files, and investigative analysis published across multiple outlets, sits Site 81, a roughly 6,000 square meter electromagnetically shielded underground intelligence center built with American money, American engineers, and enough hardening to maintain communications, even if everything above ground stops functioning. It was designed to survive electronic warfare. It was designed to survive the loss of surface infrastructure. It was designed so that the people inside it could keep running a war after the world above them goes dark. Directly adjacent to that site, beneath the Israeli Ministry of Defense compound known as the Kiryat, the structure that serves as Israel's equivalent of the Pentagon, is a second installation called the Fortress of Zion. The New York Times was given controlled access and described a nerve center where roughly 70 people sat at multiple tiers facing wall-mounted screens, tracking live strikes in real time. During active conflict, the Alma Research Center reported thousands of soldiers worked there around the clock. The Fortress of Zion is a newer, deeper extension of an older command post the Israeli military called simply the Pit. Together, they form a buried architecture of command that Israel has spent decades constructing, expanding, and hiding from public view. On March 11th, day 12 of this war, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced that it had struck that compound. Not the building above ground, not the perimeter. The underground command infrastructure beneath the Kiryat in central Tel Aviv, the same zone that was targeted in the June 2025 12-day war, where an Iranian ballistic missile struck the Da Vinci complex, and the Jerusalem Post later reported the impact landed, in their words, a stone's throw from what was then Netanyahu's office. After that strike, Israeli authorities sealed the area. Cameras were blocked. No official comment was made. Weeks later, the Prime Minister's office began undergoing renovations. To this day, the satellite imagery over that section of Tel Aviv is censored. France 24 conducted an analysis and concluded that Israeli media coverage of the June 2025 Da Vinci strike had likely been deliberately delayed. One major Israeli outlet waited a full 2 weeks before publishing anything about the impact, even after photos had already circulated online. Now, Iran is claiming it hit the same zone again, and Israel has done the same thing it did last time. It sealed the streets, blocked the cameras, refused to comment. Before you decide what to make of that claim, whether it is propaganda, whether it landed, whether it matters, you need to understand two things. You need to understand what that underground architecture actually is and what it would mean to hit it. And you need to understand the weapon Iran used to try. The IRGC has been publicly naming its targets throughout this war. It listed 27 American bases. It listed Ben Gurion Airport. It claimed 7 American and Israeli radar systems destroyed. And it identified the Kiryat, Israel's military headquarters, as a priority target from day one. The IRGC's statement on the first day of combat specified the Tel Aviv Air Base, the Kiryat compound itself, and a major defense industrial complex in Tel Aviv among its initial strike objectives. Iran targeted the same compound once before, and the evidence of what happened was sealed. It is targeting it again in a war where it has already demonstrated it can break through Israel's multi-layered air defense network, that its missiles can land in central Tel Aviv, that the interception math does not always work. The question being asked in every defense ministry on Earth right now, and being answered only in the language of sealed streets and blurred satellite maps, is whether this time was different, whether something below ground was reached, whether the nerve center that Israel spent decades burying is still intact, and whether the answer to that question changes the trajectory of a war that, by day 12, has already overturned nearly every assumption that the United States and Israel brought to the table when it began. To understand why the claimed strike on the Kiryat's underground infrastructure matters beyond the propaganda value of the claim itself, you need to understand what weapon Iran used, and how that weapon changes the physics of attacking a buried target. The missile in question is designated by Iran as the Khorramshahr-4, also called the Kheibar Shekan in its cluster warhead configuration. It first appeared in Iran's arsenal in May 2023. Its range is approximately 2,000 kilometers, placing every major Israeli city within reach from deep inside Iranian territory. Its warhead in standard configuration weighs approximately 3,800 kilograms, roughly the same destructive payload as the largest conventional bombs dropped from aircraft in World War II. But it is the cluster configuration that transforms this weapon from a precision tool into something far more dangerous for hardened underground infrastructure. The warhead opens at approximately 7 kilometers altitude. When it does, it releases around 20 individual submunitions, each carrying approximately 2.5 kilograms of explosive, across a dispersal zone that can cover a radius of 500 meters or more over a densely built urban area. The IRGC confirmed it deployed this weapon during what it called the 19th wave of Operation True Promise, naming central Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion Airport, and the 27th Air Base of the Israeli Air Force as targets, specifying warheads of up to 1,000 kilograms. Iranian state media and IRGC statements confirmed cluster munition impacts in multiple Tel Aviv metropolitan area locations. Israeli firefighters responded to 2 confirmed impact zones in central Israel where cluster submunitions had scattered. A first responder described on Israeli media finding a civilian with a severe shrapnel wound, the signature injury pattern of submunition dispersal. Here is why this matters for the underground bunker question. A conventional warhead hitting the surface above a buried command center needs to penetrate the earth directly. Against a facility built to withstand electronic warfare and with reinforced concrete shielding, a surface detonation at the wrong angle accomplishes little below ground. But a cluster warhead does something different. It does not try to punch through the earth. It saturates the surface above the facility with dozens of independent explosive events across a wide area. It shreds ventilation shafts that bring air into the underground complex. It destroys communications antennae and relay systems mounted at or near ground level. It collapses access points. It turns the surface footprint of the buried facility into what military planners call an area denial zone, a location where no one above ground survives, and from which no one below ground can safely emerge. This is a different kind of attack on underground infrastructure. Not direct penetration, systematic surface degradation. Whether that is what happened at the Kiryat on day 12 of this war is precisely what Israeli authorities are not saying. What they are doing is the same thing they did in June 2025. Seal the area, block the cameras, and say nothing. That silence exists alongside a verified mirror image that Israel itself confirmed and publicly celebrated. On March 6th, approximately 50 Israeli Air Force fighter jets dropped around 100 munitions on the underground bunker of Ali Khamenei beneath the leadership compound in central Tehran. The IDF released footage. It announced total destruction of the facility. It said the bunker extended beneath multiple city streets and contained meeting rooms, entry points, and command chambers used by Iran's senior leadership. According to the Alma Research Center's reporting, Israel's intelligence units, Unit 8200 and Unit 9900, its signals and visual intelligence branches, had spent years mapping every corridor of the facility before the strike was ordered. Israel released the evidence. Iran produced none for its Kiryat claim. But the absence of released evidence is not the same as the absence of an event. Not in a conflict where both governments are engaged in systematic information management, not when the last Iranian strike on that exact location was met with the same sealed streets and delayed media coverage, not when Google Maps and Yandex Maps still refuse to show the area where a missile reportedly landed in June 2025. The broader verified facts of this war do not resolve the specific claim, but they establish the context in which it should be weighed. The White House confirmed that Iran's ballistic missile launch rate dropped by approximately 90% from day 1 to day 6 of the war, crediting American and Israeli strikes on Iranian mobile launchers. General Dan Kane said drone attacks had also decreased by 83% from their opening peak. U.S. and Israeli operations have struck the Esfahan missile complex's underground facilities, confirmed by commercial satellite imagery. They have struck launch infrastructure, drone bases, missile production centers, and the bunker beneath the Iranian leadership compound. Both sides are fighting the same war simultaneously on 2 levels. The visible war above ground that produces press releases and satellite images and CENTCOM videos, and the invisible war below ground, where the real command architecture lives, and where neither government will confirm what has actually been hit. The sealed streets of Tel Aviv and the released footage from Tehran are 2 chapters of the same story. One side chose transparency, the other chose silence. What that silence is protecting is the question neither government will answer, because the answer, in either direction, changes the calculus of everything that comes next. Let us now place the underground bunker war inside the broader picture of what this conflict actually looks like on day 12, because the numbers tell a story that cuts through the claims of both governments. Iran has fired more than 500 ballistic and cruise missiles and launched over 2,000 drone operations since February 28th. The IRGC confirmed this publicly to Fars news agency on March 5th. Of that total, approximately 40% was directed at Israel, the remaining 60% at American military positions across the Gulf region. On day 1 alone, roughly 90 ballistic missiles were fired at Israel. Day 2, around 60. After that, the cadence fell to approximately 20 per day. But the composition changed. Individual salvos became smaller and more targeted. The weapons themselves became heavier and more destructive. What began as a saturation campaign to overwhelm air defenses shifted into a precision campaign designed to reach specific targets that survived the initial wave. That shift in targeting discipline, from mass to precision, is what makes the Kyria claim plausible enough to investigate seriously. Because if Iran exhausted its largest, least accurate missiles in the opening days, what it is firing now is the remainder of its inventory, the weapons it chose to conserve, the targets it chose to reserve them for. And the targets it publicly named from day one were not random. They were the same targets that survived the 2025 12-day war. They are the infrastructure that Israel depends on to sustain command coherence across a conflict that its military planners anticipated might last months. The human cost on the Israeli side is documented across verified reporting. As of early March, while not get 619 Israelis had been hospitalized, at least 10 Israeli civilians had been killed. 4 remained in critical condition. The Beit Shemesh shelter strike on March 1st, where a missile carrying approximately 500 kilograms of explosives collapsed an underground civilian bomb shelter accessible by 2 flights of stairs, killing 9 people, established something that every air defense planner in the region has now absorbed: that Iran's missiles can penetrate Israeli civilian shelter infrastructure at depths that conventional protection was never designed to handle. If a civilian shelter 2 flights below street level could not survive a direct hit, the question of what a military command center requires to survive becomes significantly more complex. Meanwhile, the IRGC is not the only party that has been tracking this war's underground dimensions. American forces have struck the underground ballistic missile facilities at the Esfahan missile complex, confirmed by commercial satellite imagery. B-2 stealth bombers dropped 2,000-pound bunker-penetrating munitions on deeply buried Iranian missile sites. The White House press secretary confirmed this explicitly on March 10th, stating that the U.S. was moving to dismantle Iran's missile infrastructure at its source, including underground. Israeli Unit A200 and Unit 9900, signals intelligence and visual intelligence respectively, had mapped Khamenei's personal underground command complex for years before the March 6th strike that destroyed it, with 100 munitions dropped by 50 aircraft. Both sides know exactly where the other's underground infrastructure is. Both sides have been attacking it. And both sides are selectively releasing information about what they have hit and what they have not. Because in this war, the information is as much a weapon as the missile. Iran needs the Kyria claim to be credible. It needs the Israeli public, the Israeli military establishment, and the watching world to believe that no underground layer is safe, that the command architecture Israel spent decades building can be reached. Whether the claim is accurate matters less, strategically, than whether it is believed. Israel needs the opposite. It needs its underground command capacity to appear unimpaired. Because the moment its military command layer is perceived to have been compromised, the war takes on a different dimension. Allies recalibrate, enemies accelerate. The psychological foundation of deterrence, which rests on the belief that the defender can absorb a first strike and still respond coherently, begins to fracture. This is why the streets are sealed. This is why there's no comment. This is why satellite maps still blur the block. And here is where the story of the underground war converges with every other story of this conflict. No one has clean information. The oil market is being played by competing official statements. The THAAD withdrawal is confirmed, but its strategic implications are debated. The ceasefire reports are retracted. The mine-laying claims are partially confirmed. The tanker escort is announced, then denied. And now the most sensitive military installation in Israel has been named by Iran as a target, the area has been sealed, and both governments are engaged in the same operation, controlling what the world is allowed to see. Mojtaba Khamenei, who has been supreme leader for less than 4 days, now holds the targeting decisions. A man who has never held public office, who inherited this war from a father who was killed before it reached its current scale, is making the calls on what Iran fires next and where. The buried command centers of both nations are the most important real estate in the world right now. Neither government will tell you their status. The sealed streets say everything.